everybody, and welcome into another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I am glad that you've decided to join us once again on this beautiful July night. If you're listening live or whatever you're doing, listening later on in the week, enjoying your summer, enjoying your vacation, enjoying mowing the lawn, having a few lawn mowing beers out there. Those are always the best. I always enjoy those. I forgot to have one last night though when I mowed the lawn, so shame on me. I did not do my household duties and have my my lawn mowing beer. But nonetheless, whatever you're out there doing, I hope you're enjoying it and enjoying listening to this podcast. Probably enjoying this more than actually watching the Red Sox right now. It's like getting friggin' surgery while you're awake right now. It's just not pleasant experience. But nonetheless, we will definitely dive into them today, as it's going to be a pretty Red Sox heavy show. Although we are going to get into some Patriots here, as it is officially opening day for Patriots training camp, and it's reporting day for all 32 NFL teams. So it's right around the corner, folks. It's you can almost smell it. It's almost here, football season, and boy, I cannot wait, because it's been way too long. And now that the Red Sox have kind of gone down the toilet, hopefully we see some improvement out of the Patriots. Who knows? We'll definitely delve into that here as we go along. But we are getting closer to the start of the regular season in the NFL now that we're into training camp, and we're only a week and a half or so away from games. The Hall of Fame game will be I think next week. So it's all coming up here soon, and boy, it can't come soon enough for the NFL season. But nonetheless, we will jump into our out of the box segment, as the Boston Red Sox have not exactly been on a hot streak here, as they are 1-1 against the Cleveland Guardians. They're in play right now. So the Red Sox are trying to get back even here, as far as trying to win another series. As we know, they still haven't yet. As far as in the division, they dropped that first series out of the gate against the Toronto Blue Jays after the All-Star game. So they're over 10, over 11 in series now. They're just pitiful in the American League East division this year, which that explains a lot of where you are. Because guess what? You're playing the American League East in the wild card, because that's outside of the Seattle Mariners. That's Toronto and Tampa. So it is not great. Not great, Bob. Not great. But the Red Sox, after dropping last night's game, have fallen back to 500 on the season and were passed by the Baltimore Orioles. And the Red Sox have dropped into last place. So they're last place in the division, 5 back in the wild card. 4 or 5 back in the wild card. So it's just not good. It's not good, folks. It's not good. So check out, if you know a Red Sox fan, which if you listen to this podcast, you probably are one yourself, or you know one if you're not a baseball fan, or if you're if you're a degenerate Yankees fan, or whoever else that's listening to my podcast. You want to go check on your friends that are Red Sox fans, because it's not good. It's not good. They need a wellness check. Buy him a beer. It's not good. But the Red Sox are still trying to slog along, as they did get Nathan Eovaldi back right before the All-Star break, so that was a plus. Although tonight he's not looking all that hot. And then we ended up losing Rafael Devers to the IL. He's on the 10-day IL, and he'll probably be back on the 3rd, August 3rd, so the day after the trading deadline. And there has been some news along that front as far as the trade deadline has gone. Take it with a grain of salt, but the Red Sox are not going to get into any serious discussions as far as trading Xander Bogaerts or Rafael Devers. So that looks like that's going to be the case. I would definitely believe it with Rafael Devers. But with Xander Bogaerts, I'll take that with a little bit of grain of salt there, folks, because I'm not, as much as I want to see Xander stay and as much as he wants to stay here, I don't know if the team really wants to have him back, which I still can't wrap my head around that. So why would you not want to trade one of your best assets? We'll get into that here in a moment. But it sounds as though Xander Bogaerts will not be moved at the trading deadline. And it does, and according to Buster Olney from ESPN, it does sound like JD Martinez, Nathan Eovaldi, and Christian Vasquez, all expiring contracts at the end of this year, could be on the move, or at least could be movable trade chips that they have going into Tuesday of next week when the Red Sox are in game 2 of that series against Houston. It is trade deadline day, so we'll see if there are any new faces that come or go. But that's really kind of been the news there. And Bloom did speak to the Greg Hill show this morning on WEEI, and also had a media scrum today before the start of this game with the Guardians. And it does kind of what you thought, where basically saying they're going to try to be competitive, going to try to help this team win, but also taking a long-term view. Really didn't get into anything when it comes to Rafael Devers, Xander Bogaerts, or any of the actual trade chips that they have. So it was, well, Bloom didn't join them. It was Sam Kennedy on the Greg Hill show. But Bloom had his media scrum today, and because he did speak with Nesson and yesterday, and basically kind of what you thought it would be, just again trying to keep this in the long-term view, but also wanted to try to help this team win, that they're not going to give up on this season, blah, 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 blah. But again, there's so many injuries, so much going on around this team that I don't know if they're going to be able to put this back into like first, second gear and kind of get this thing going again. They're kind of stuck in neutral or backing up here, as so to speak. So we'll see how this all kind of plays out for the Red Sox, as that's really most of what happened there as far as with any trade deadline speculation so far. There really hasn't been a lot of movement, a few smaller things around the league, but nothing too big. Of course, the Juan Soto move, what could happen there? That's going to be the biggest prize out in the market for some of those contending teams, a la the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, you name it. Hell, even some of the lower level teams that might have a lot of prospects might want to take a swing at it. But of course, this is a man that's going to be asking for a hefty contract. He is going to be worth all of it, though, in my opinion. He's that good of a player. But that's one of the big chips. But again, nothing really has been happening around the Red Sox. And as we mentioned, it's start of training camp for the Boston Red Sox, for the New England Patriots, as it was reporting day for all 32 NFL teams, including obviously the Patriots. So Gillette Stadium was packed today. And of course, so many things have been going on, as far as we had interviews with Bill Belichick at his media availability at the beginning of the scrum, at the beginning of practice, I should say, and pretty much what you would expect as far as when it came to talking about his coaches, which we'll get into here in a moment as well. But basically he said that he's going to take all the blame as far as he's the head coach. The buck basically stops with him, and that he obviously trusts and believes and really has a lot of affection for the Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, who he brought back to his staff, who are now offensive assistants, line, quarterback coaches, all of those. So, of course, he's not going to throw them under the bus, but it was interesting to hear those comments. But ones that were actually interesting, something that I did not actually think that Belichick would say, is that Mac Jones has made dramatic improvements from where he was. And that word dramatic is something that I was really surprised that he dropped that on Mac, because he throws compliments around like manholes. And man, did Mac Jones get a big one there from Bill. So we'll definitely dive into that here later on in the show. And of course, the other big news in Boston sports was that there was a rumor that the Celtics, and this was more something that got broken a couple weeks, or this was news that broke a couple days ago, but honestly, the actual action, if you will, it was not 2 days ago. This was more something that happened a couple weeks ago. But the Boston Celtics apparently have reached out to the Brooklyn Nets regarding a trade for Kevin Durant. And in the trade package, it was a first round pick, Jaylen Brown, and Derek White that they were willing to send to the Brooklyn Nets. But they did not obviously pull the trigger because there was no trade made. But of course, there was all kinds of speculation out there. And of course, the other thing is that Jaylen Brown did send out a tweet with SMH shaking my head. So of course, a lot of Twitter interpreters out there were trying to see what that means, good, bad, ugly, wherever that lays for for Jaylen Brown. So we'll try to touch on that here a little bit, as well, as that was something that has been flying around the internet, flying around everywhere, flying around Twitter. But again, it was something that was about 2 weeks ago that got floated, so it wasn't like brand new. So it's not like this was something the Celtics were like that you're going to expect that this is going to happen any day now. By now, 2 weeks old, I think they were just checking in at this point. But we'll touch on that here a little bit. So without further ado, we will get to the main topic, the Boston Red Sox. And if I had the money, this is where I'd be queuing up a little bit of Tom Petty, if I could afford those royalty fees. Because the Red Sox are free falling, baby. They're free falling, free falling. And there's nothing, it looks like, that's going to stop them from doing so, if we're going to be honest. Because injuries, maybe trading away some of your stars, some of your fringe stars as well, and just underperformance. It's just a nasty soup of ugliness right now. Of course, they did not start things off on the right foot. Coming off of the All-Star break last week, Friday night against the Blue Jays was the worst loss in team history. They lost 28-5. And no, I did not say that wrong. The Blue Jays put up 28 runs, including an 11-run fourth inning. Yes, the Blue Jays put up 4 touchdowns on the Red Sox. My God, it just keeps on rolling down the hill in the worst way possible. They got swept by the Blue Jays. They took the first game against the Guardians, and right now, and they lost yesterday. So, and it's in a 4-game set, but they've just come out of the All-Star break in a awful way. Now, you knew just the way that they went into the All-Star break that it was a tough hill to climb, but they were still right there looking up at the wild card, but not too far. But they've just absolutely gotten pummeled the last 3-4 days, minus that win. And you can just see the lack of talent that's out there, one, due to injuries, is one of the biggest things. Obviously, you don't have one of the top three hitters in all of the sport in Rafael Devers. He's sidelined until next week. On the 3rd, it sounds like he's going to be ready. You still don't have Trevor Story back, although it sounds like he might be starting to swing a bat here, but still, he's not in the lineup. So you're really left with Xander Bogaerts and JD Martinez, who just got back last night. So Bogaerts, Martinez, and if you want to throw Vasquez in there, and then Verdugo. So, but I would honestly just throw Martinez, Bogaerts, and Verdugo in there, and that's pretty much all you have for a lineup. So it's the sad excuse, sad excuse for what they're dragging out there. And if you want to go back to that 25-8 loss, 28-5 loss against Toronto on Friday night, the Blue Jays had an inside the park grand slam, which it just shouldn't happen. And on the play, that's where you had Jarren Duran just watch a fly ball go over his head. And he had the most ludicrous comment. Well, he had ludicrous comments afterwards, just kind of poking at the reporters. Oh, well, when you go out and catch a fly ball in Twilight, let me know. And just sounded so immature at that point, where it just shows where the Red Sox are at right now. Where yes, Duran had promise when he first came up, and it looked as though earlier this year Duran, right before they hit the skids, when they were in that nice win streak there towards the end of June, well, between May and June, when he had come up to fill in for Kike, he played pretty well, but since the calendar hit July, the pumpkin of Duran is just absolutely rotted out, and he's going back to striking out a lot. He's not a major league outfielder. He is not a major league outfielder. And I know I'm the one to talk because I'm not a great outfielder either, but that's besides the point. I mean, anybody with half a brain that watches baseball all the time can see that Jarren Duran is just an awful outfielder, just an awful outfielder. And I think people kind of get caught up in that he has this blazing speed, which he does, which if he was just on base all the time, walking and getting singles and doubles and stealing bases all the time, then it would be one thing. But he's a guy that's not even making his weight out there offensively, if you will, just hitting. He just hasn't gotten back to that area where he was right before the All-Star break. And it's just been pathetic. And then that whole situation with Duran and the fly ball and the dusk and the comments, that was just another gut punch right there. This team is just playing with both of their hands tied behind their back at this point. You lost Chris Sale again. You only have two of your full-time rotation members ready, and that's Nathan Eovaldi, who has not looked the same since he's come back from injury. So again, you kind of have to give him a little bit here because it's his first two starts back. I don't even think he had a rehab start. And Nick Pivetta, who, talking about pumpkins rotting, he's gone back to being a pumpkin here as well, because it just has not been the same Nick Pivetta that we saw from that May to June stretch. Now, if we were relying on Nick Pivetta as your fourth starter, sure, because he pitched okay the other night, but it wasn't anything to write home about. But now that he's your second starter, that's kind of scary. And with Nathan Eovaldi not being the same, and you're having to rely on Josh Winkowski, who's been up and down this year, and Brian Bayo, who is a top prospect, but again, in his three starts, he just hasn't had the command. The stuff has been there. It's just been the command has been way off, way too many walks. And then when he does give up a hit because of the amount of walks, they're scoring runs. And so he's just not ready yet. And then the one saving grace has been Cutter Crawford, who's actually been pretty solid out there for the Red Sox. But then again, you're having to rely on guys like Connor Seabolt, who just is not ready for major league action. And it's just been a salad of just yuck out there that they've had to rely on. And like we said, you don't have Devers, you don't have Trevor Story, you don't have Kike Hernandez out there, and you're having to rely on guys like Bobby Dahlbeck and Franchi Cordero and Jackie Bradley Jr. at the plate, and then you're bringing up guys from Worcester, and it's just pathetic is what they're rolling out there right now, and they're just absolutely falling on their face. And I know they're not out of the playoff picture. What, they're 4 or 5 games out now at this point of the last wild card spot. Of course, the division is gone for anybody in the American League East unless the Yankees absolutely collapse. But the Red Sox still technically have a shot at the wild card, but with this roster you're putting out there, and with the injuries, with the amount of injuries that you have, and from the standpoint that they're really not coming back outside of Rafael Devers, who obviously that's going to be a big boost to your lineup, but when it's not like everybody's coming back here at once, they're kind of slowly going to be trickling back. Is it going to be in time for you to be back in this in the American League race, in a wild card race? And I just don't feel great about it at all. And I know last week I talked about you should go out there, show the team, show these players that you're willing to make a move. Go get a Josh Bell, go get a first baseman, go get somebody like that. Which, yes, I mean, would it be nice to actually have a major league first baseman? But we're talking about a situation here where the Red Sox just have nothing going on for them right now. They have, like I said, they have 3 legitimate hitters. They have 2 legitimate starters. The bullpen is still the bullpen, although you do have Garrett Whitlock and Tanner Houck back, but it's just a mess. It's an absolute mess what's going on right now. So I just don't think getting one. It's like if you had Rafael Devers back, if you had Trevor Story back, if you had that middle of the order going with JD and with Xander Bogaerts and with Verdugo, you were talking a completely different lineup, and then you go get a Josh Bell, then yes, we'd be in a totally different position. And if you had healthier starters, if Chris Sale didn't take one back off his hand, then it would be a totally different position that they'd be in. But right now, there's just so many injuries right now, and you're playing with the Woo Sox basically with a few major leaguers. It's just not the same at all. But so now we have to come to that decision: should you be buyers or sellers? And of course, I just went on that whole soliloquy there. So I'm not going to be in anywhere where I want to be a buyer, just because I just don't think this team has it right now. I just don't think this is a team worth investing in right now, as far as for right now, which sucks. I hate saying that. I don't want to have to say that. I want meaningful baseball and going down the stretch in August and in September. I want the Red Sox to be in October. I want them to be a serious contender. I don't want to be sitting on my couch watching the Yankees play whichever wild card team, watching the Blue Jays and Rays and the Mariners, but no Red Sox. Of course, I'll be watching baseball, but it's just gonna suck not to have them there. And this all goes back to Chaim Bloom as far as what the hell was the plan. You had a team that was 2 games away from the World Series last year. 2 effing games away from the World Series. And you did bring in Trevor Story, but at the same time, everybody saw that for what it was as far as Xander Bogaerts' replacement, because for some goddamn reason, you don't want to pay one of your superstars that has done nothing but hustled his ass off, put all his blood, sweat, and tears into this organization since he came up in 2013 and since he's been in the minor leagues. This is all he's known. And he's been basically your leader since David Ortiz retired. And he's won 2 World Series. He is one of the better offensive shortstops in baseball. And I know this year the power's been down, but he's still hitting for average. He's still coming up in big situations. But this is a guy that you shouldn't have screwed around with. You should have said, all right, he's a cornerstone there at shortstop. And if we sign him to a 4 to 5 year deal, by the time our 18-year-old stud shortstop prospect that we have, by the time he's ready, then Xander Bogaerts will be 35 years old, and if he wants to stick around, it won't be as expensive to keep him here, and you can maybe switch him around, turn him into DH, whatever you want to do with him. But this is it's just what are we doing? What are we doing? You didn't go out, you didn't fix the outfield, you didn't go get another major league caliber outfielder. You went as far as that what can play every day. You went out and traded for Jackie Bradley Jr., and I know they did it so they could get some of the prospects from the Brewers. But the point of this is that they went out and traded Jackie Bradley. Okay, if he's your 4th outfielder, fine, I can live with it. But you didn't go sign a free agent that could play the outfield. You didn't. And then on top of all this, you didn't go and invest in the bullpen, which you needed a closer. You needed late inning relievers to go along with Garrett Whitlock, who was out there at the time at the beginning of the season. You had a closer by committee who I hate that. I never want to hear that in my life, but for some reason, because of how Chaim Bloom decides to run this organization, I have a feeling it's going to come up again, which wants to make me vomit every time I have to talk about closer by committee, because how many effing times do we have to sit through that goddamn experiment and see it just absolutely implode in 95% of these cases, 98% of the cases? Call me old school, call me whatever you want to do as far as a closer's concerned, but there's something to be said about having that one guy in the 9th inning that you don't have to worry about. And I get the whole thing as far as playing maybe the analytical game, because I'm not all opposed to the analytics. I get it if you have a guy like Garrett Whitlock or another late inning guy that you can pitch in the 6th, 7th, 8th inning, where maybe you understand where it is a very important situation, a very important time of the game. I get it. I can get along with that, but I still, once you get to the 9th inning, unless the guys pitch 3, 4, 5 days in a row, having that closer that you can rely on just about every day, that's where, call me old school, but I want that everyday closer. There's something to be said for having dependability, having a guy that you know can lock the game down. Is he going to be perfect every single night? No, but as long as you're not blowing, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 saves, whatever it's been for the Red Sox this year, a ridiculous number, he should have addressed that. And of course, the other thing that he should have addressed was a first baseman. He should have addressed first base. He should have gone and got a veteran first baseman that's played there before and can hit somewhat. Because that defense it's been atrocious over there. Bobby is not great at first base. Franchy Cordero is a butcher. And then on top of that, neither one of them can hit, although Bobby's hit a home run tonight and has had some big at-bats, but nonetheless, one game does not make a whole season. And On top of all of that, you let Kyle Schwarber walk out the door where he gets on base. He's leading the National League in home runs. And oh, yeah, the way that we've seen the Red Sox just not give a shit about what happens over at first base, especially defensively, then what the hell would have been the problem bringing in Kyle Schwarber to play one goddamn year over at first base? What would have been the problem? It would have been 1 year at first base. And then guess what? If you wanted to go and trade away JD Martinez, or if he walks after this year, you know what you can do? Put Kyle Schwarber at DH. You can put him at DH. Oh my God, what a concept. You can go put him at DH. So just the way that they've treated that, just the way they treated that position where it's been a kind of black hole as far as defensively and really offensively as well. Why not, if you're going to say screw it to the defense, just go have Schwarber be out there? At least he would have been here hitting 30 plus bombs. He would have been there with Rafael Devers, Xander Bogaerts, Trevor Story, because it's not like he cost the Phillies that much. What, $80 million? What, over 4 years? So what, we're at 20 something million dollars or whatever it was. So that wouldn't have been that bad because you have all this money coming off the books. I just don't get it. I don't get what the plan is. And then the way that you look at these Red Sox, as far as when we talk about Bloom and what the plans are, you're not signing Xander Bogaerts to a long-term deal. And the one deal that you offered him, you pissed him off because it was a quote-unquote 4-year extension when really it was a 1-year tack on to the deal that he already has that's existing. So it would have been 1 year for $30 million. And yes, I understand $30 million for 1 year would have been good. Or is anybody would, like, in most of us listening to podcasts would probably take $30 million and be like, okay, I'm fine with that. But we're talking about, it's more the length of the contract of like, all right, can you at least give me 4 or 5 years? If they offered him a legitimate 4-year, 5-year deal, not one that you're tacking a year on, but a legitimate 4 or 5-year deal worth what, $27 million. So you're in the range of what, 130, 140 something million dollars. You're talking about pretty much like a Trevor Story deal ish. So if you gave me that I would have been fine with handing out Bogaerts that, but no, you come to him with this piss poor deal, and then like we talked about last week with Rafael Devers, what the hell are you doing there? That's the one guy that I do not want to see walk out the door. Don't let him leave Fenway Park ever in his life as far as it being his home stadium, because he is worth every penny, every single penny of his deal. He is that special. And so what? He's adequate at third base. If I mean, if he was still being a butcher over there, which he's actually this year hasn't been, then I would still give him that money, because you know what? Sometimes you just have to pay for the bat. You have to pay for the bat. Because like I talked about last week, nobody pays huge, gigantic $350 million deals for just a defensive player. I mean, if you're good, obviously, if you're in the ilk of being a 5-tool player, or you're in that conversation and you have the top tier defensive skills, yes, it makes it even better. You probably get more money. But the point is, what do you usually pay for? At least as far as your everyday players, most of the time, the ones that get the most money are the ones that offensively can rake. And what can Rafael Devers do? Absolutely tear the cover off the ball, hits for average, hits for power, drives in runs, one of the better players. So I just don't get why you go to him with a Matt Olson comp and try to say, here's 8 years, 186. No, I'd say piss off too, because you're sending me like half of what I would like, or at least I'd be in the neighborhood of 275, 300, 325, whatever it is. But just you're not signing. I mean, obviously that's they still have another year for that. But what are you doing? You're not signing them and then come here to the trade deadline. Right? It feels like are they going to shit or get off the pot? Because I just don't have a good feeling of which way they're going either way. And am I going to sit here and believe all the things like Sam Kennedy and Bloom have said as far as to try to play like the PR spin, even though Bloom wants to say that he's trying to avoid the PR spin, he doesn't want to toss those type of hand grenades or however he said, as far as when it comes to the Red Sox and what he viewed from when his time in Tampa, how the Red Sox tried to quote unquote handle like PR with some of the players. I get it. You're in an awkward position. You have guys that are fan favorites that's going to be hard to trade away. But let's see a hard direction in this team. And as far as all right, if we're going to build for the future, maybe we sell off some of those pieces. Like I said, you sell off you sell off the JD, you sell off the Evaldi, you sell off the Vasquez, you sell off a Kike, see what you could get for some decent prospects back. And then for me, I would keep Xander Bogaerts and try this and give and right before the trade deadline, you go to him and you're like, all right, here's a serious deal, 5 years, 175 or 150 or whatever it would be to give him 27 million a year to have him continue to play short for you, continue to be in this organization, and then if for whatever reason, if you can't come to some type of agreement, if that's where he's looking for 30, $35 million a year, which I don't think Bogaerts is that greedy, even though he has Scott Boras as his client, as his agent. Bogaerts is the one that came back on a team friendly 6-year, $120 million deal. So we know that Bogaerts likes playing here, and he said that he wants to stay here, and you believe him. But this is where, if it comes to that, and then he does decline that type of deal, then that's where you seriously got to consider trading him. Or if you're the Red Sox and for whatever reason you don't want to trade him for whatever reason. I mean, I'm sorry, you don't want to re-sign him for whatever asinine reason you want to try to give us. Then trade him, get assets for him as much as it's going to hurt. Because trust me, it's going to hurt like a bitch to see Xander Bogaerts go to the Cardinals, go to whatever shortstop needy playoff team there is out there. It's going to hurt. I'm going to get emotional about it. I'll be sad. I'll be angry. I'll be pissed. I'll be whatever emotion you throw it out there. Anything but happy. Any of those negative emotions, they're going to come flooding in if he gets traded. But at the same time, if you're not going to seriously bring him back and just let him walk out the door, and you're not going to try to make moves to improve the team, then what the hell is the point? That's my whole point here, is just pick a direction and go with it. If you want to try to make it back to the playoffs, which it's going to be hard with all the injuries and just with the roster that Bloom put together early in the year and didn't patch holes that were already there after they were 2 games from going to the World Series, where he should have improved this team. There were obvious needs, and for whatever reason, his stubbornness or, well, this was kind of ahead of schedule, well, I don't want to fuck with my plan, then what are we doing? It's so hard to get a grasp on what the Red Sox came into this year. It's like other organizations, you're kind of like, okay, we know what the Phillies were trying to do with Dave Dombrowski. They were trying to buy their way back into contention. Or you go with the Dodgers, they're trying to draft, develop, and also they're trying to do the best of both worlds. They went out and signed Freddie Freeman. They obviously last year traded for Trey Turner and Max Scherzer. Scherzer left, but Trey Turner's still there. But the point being is that they have all this money that they can spend on free agents, and they spend it like a drunken sailor. But guess what? They also have boatloads of prospects that they hold on to as well, so that they can make trades for well, I'd say Mookie Betts, but for Christ's sake, they didn't give the Red Sox any of their real top tier guys. I'll tell you that much right now, because Jeter Downs does not look all like he's ready for the bright lights of Boston. And Alex Verdugo has been solid, but nowhere near what I would want back in for a return for one of the best players in baseball. But the point being is that you have these clubs that have these directions, that know what they want to do and they execute it. But just with the Red Sox the last couple of years, it's like, I understand that you're trying to build this farm system, trying to build from the bottom up so that you have all the stability, which I can admire, but you're also the Boston fucking Red Sox. You have both. You have money and you're building up a farm system. So instead of trying to plead poor, how about we pick a direction here? How about we pick the direction of, let's build from the bottom up, but we can also use this money to fill these holes so that so that we're not left with the 2000, what we have of the 2020 season, and just having these awful kind of peaks and valleys. So it's just so frustrating because it just doesn't feel like there's a solid direction. It just kind of feels like we're hoarding prospects, but they're not doing anything with them. Because let's remember, folks, prospects are not just they're not always just to come up and be all-stars, be superstars, be role players, because you know what? Sometimes prospects are just prospects. They're trade chips. Because obviously, unless you have another Rafael Devers in your system, you have a Ken Griffey Jr., you have any of these top tier prospects, or hell, there are obviously other ones like Xander Bogaerts. There are these other ones that that are in your system that you don't want to touch because you've looked at them and evaluated and know, okay, this guy really is a legitimate player. He really is. So we're going to keep him. But if you have other guys that are in your system that are, let's say, they've started to get hot, they started to be something, then maybe you go out and you're like, okay, I need to get this late inning reliever. I need to go get a first baseman. I need to go get help in my starting rotation. I need to get this or that. Guess what? You make a trade that might hurt. You might be, well, this, I hope this one doesn't come back to bite us, but you know what? We were going for it. Sometimes you have to do that. And I just don't feel like that's what they're doing. They're just hoarding them all. They would rather be, okay, Baseball America says we're in the top 5. We're top 3. Oh, now we're top 1 as far as a farm system. What did he friggin' do? You know what that got the Red Sox in 2016? There was one bona fide superstar that came out of that 2016 system. You know who it is? Rafael Devers. And you know the guy that drafted all these ones? Dave Dombrowski. Trader Dave. The guy that always gets ripped for always gutting his farm system. Well, you know what? He might have gutted it to get some guys like Chris Sale, Craig Kimbrell, guys that helped you win a World Series. And you know what happened? The guys he traded away, Yohan Moncada, solid player, but not anything that's come back to really bite you. Michael Kopech, a good arm, but always hurt. And then the guys he traded away for Kimbrell, you have not heard nothing about Anderson Espinoza, who was supposed to be like this stud out there, who people were comparing to, I think, throwing out some Pedro comparisons, which is just nuts, which they've started to do with Brian Bello, which I don't want to put that on Bello. But I think Bello is going to be better than Espinoza, but that's not saying too much because Espinoza never made the majors, blah, blah, blah. Then you had Manuel Margot. He's been a solid guy for Tampa after he left San Diego. But so the point being here is that none of them really burned you in that trade. And Dave Dombrowski won a World Series. So as crazy as it sounds, is right now I'd rather kind of have Dave Dombrowski because you know what? He actually did restock the farm system. He honestly did. Tristan Cassius was a pick. Was a Dave Dombrowski pick. He's the top prospect. And it looks like he could be a legitimate first baseman of the future. Brian Bello, Dombrowski. You go through the list. And a lot of those top tier guys, Brian Mata, a lot of the ones that people kind of hold up there are all Dave Dombrowski. Obviously, except for the last couple of years where Bloom's been there. Because we all know Marcelo Meyer, who is going to be probably the top prospect in the system, was a Dave Dombrowski, was a Bloom pick. The Yorks, those ones are Bloom picks, but for the most part, a lot of the top tier guys are are Dombrowski. So we can give Dombrowski all the crap in the world for gutting the farm system, but you know what? He actually held on to the ones that were good. He held on to Rafael Devers when I believe it was in the deal with the Chicago White Sox for Chris Sale. They wanted Rafael Devers, but they said no, and they gave away Moncada, which, thank God. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God. So it's just where this kind of all leads to, at least where they are right now, is just like, what are we doing here at the trade deadline? Let's pick a direction. And even if you sell, get pieces for the future. But remember, if you're going to sell, just remember, if you can re-sign Devers, and if you do re-sign Bogarts, just remember to reinvest that money back into the major league club. Don't just, all right, we're going to sell for the future and we're just going to go into the tank like the Baltimore Orioles. No, even if you do get rid of some of these guys and you're like, all right, we're looking forward to rebuilding here. Let's not go completely into the tank as well, because there are pieces, there are good pieces to work with here. We all know Rafael Devers is one of them. We know Xander Bogaerts, if they choose to, is one of them. And obviously, if you bring up Tristan Cassius, he's one to work with. And Verdugo is one to work with as well. So there are pieces there. And then obviously you have Trevor Story, who will be coming back. So you have a plan. At least you have things that you can work with. Now let's go ahead and let's fill the gaps there with major league talent. I just don't want to see this become what the Red Sox were in the early 90s, what they were back in the 60s before 1967, from the early to mid 60s, where it's just, okay, we have this one superstar. It's all going to go by the wayside here. We'll waste 5 years of his career. You're the Boston Red Sox. You can afford to go out, sign big free agent money. And even if you brought back Bogarts and you re-signed Devers, you're still going to have a lot of money that you can build around this team with. So it's just pick a direction is what I want to see. Pick a direction, and if you pick the direction of going to sell mode, don't just hoard prospects. Maybe try to get some other major league help so that you actually have something to look forward to here. So it's going to be interesting. It really will be somewhat interesting to see what happens. Now, I know we spent a lot of time on the Red Sox here, so let's switch over to the New England Patriots, who are starting training camp this week, as they just kicked it off today. And of course, as we talked about at the top of the show, when it comes to Bill Belichick, he did talk about a couple of things that were interesting. Of course, the big storyline in the offseason outside of player acquisitions were what's going to happen as far as the offensive coordinator. Because if you forgot, remember Josh McDaniels is now the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. So that leaves the Patriots without an OC, and that leaves your talented second-year quarterback in Mac Jones without that trusted confidant, if you will, at offensive coordinator who's been there for pretty much most of the Patriots dynasty outside of the Charlie Weiss years from 01 to 04, and then the Bill O'Brien, those 3 years that he had. So Josh McDaniels has been the Patriots offensive coordinator for a large chunk. He and Charlie Weiss have been the two big offensive coordinators over this time span. And now you don't have that offensive coordinator there. So what did the Patriots do? They brought back Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, who have flamed out as head coaches in Detroit and New York, respectively. So the Patriots are putting trust into them being offensive assistants or quarterback / line coaches or assistants, however they skirt around it, because both of those guys are getting paid millions of dollars by their former team. So if they were renamed a coordinator, then they have to take a pay cut. So playing the games there, which, I mean, I guess it's whatever. But at the same time, do you really feel comfortable even if they named one of those two the coordinator? I sure as hell wouldn't, because I don't feel comfortable with Joe Judge being the offensive coordinator, because this is a guy that pretty much, I wouldn't say ruined, but has sunk the career of Daniel Jones, where he seemed like he was going to be maybe not a superstar, but he was going to be a solid quarterback for the Giants, and he just hasn't been nothing but kind of just blah. He's kind of gone down the tubes as far as Daniel Jones. I'd put him in like one of those second to last tiers of quarterbacks if you're making one of those lists. So he ruined Daniel Jones. Matt Patricia just flamed out in Detroit. Neither one of them has any experience. Well, I should say Matt Patricia doesn't have near the experience that even Judge has, because Judge was the wide receiver / special teams coach when he was the last time that he was here. And now Joe Judge is quarterback coach. It's things are up in the air. But of course, Belichick here at camp did say, when they were asked about that, he did say he's got obviously the full confidence in both Patricia and in Judge. He's happy to have them aboard. And when again he was pressed for as far as asking about an offensive coordinator, then that's where Belichick did come back and said that no, this is basically the buck stops with him, that he's the one that's held responsible. So for anything that goes right or wrong, basically he's the one to blame for anything that happens with the team. So he comes in charge. So, which, I mean, you expected him to say. He's not going to throw two of his friends underneath the bus. So I wasn't all that surprised, but again, it would be nice to have some clarity as far as who the offensive coordinator is, just to kind of know who's going to be in his ear and how worried you're going to be. Now, if it was Nick Caley, I'd feel a lot better in this situation, but it's not even Nick Caley at this point in time. And we all know that Bill O'Brien is still down in Alabama. So that kind of dream scenario as far as the takeover didn't even happen there. So it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of plays out through the camp. And I guess from reports today that Matt Patricia was calling plays through the walkie-talkie during practice. So that was the big hoopla down there from the first media availability. And then the other big news is that Bill Belichick, in his press conference when he was asked about Mac Jones, obviously talked about this is going to be a second year and improvements. And when he got into the improvement area, he did say that Mac Jones has drastically improved, which that caught my attention when he mentioned the drastically improved, because like I mentioned earlier, he doesn't throw compliments around. Like I said, he throws them like manhole covers. They just don't come along every day. Even the Tom Brady's, the Rob Gronkowski's, the Julian Edelman's, the Teddy Bruschi's, all the guys, the Ty Laws, he just doesn't go out there and say, give a compliment every single day. But he did about Mac Jones. And I know there are Mac Jones detractors out there. And I know some people will want to say, well, what else is he going to say about his quarterback? Well, he didn't have to say that about Mac. He could just been like, oh, yeah, we know we've seen steady improvement from Mac. He's been in the playbook, and we'll see how his offseason is. His offseason work has gone here, going through camp, but we're happy with what we've seen, blah, 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 blah. He didn't, but to throw in the word drastic improvement, that says something for a rookie that had over 3,800 yards, had 22 touchdowns. What was it, like 13, 14 picks? So he had a pretty good rookie season, and you saw a lot to like from Mac, and it was definitely something to that kind of that perked up your ears, that he threw out drastically, because if this is a guy that's, I wouldn't say mastered, because obviously it's only second year, but if he's eaten up a lot of that playbook and really become a student of the game, if you will, which I think that's kind of already what he was last year. But now that he's had, this is his second year, he feels more comfortable in this system. He feels more comfortable about kind of going to coaches and say, no, I like this play better than I do that play, putting his own input into the system instead of just being Mac Jones, the rookie, where, okay, you called that play. All right, I'll do it. All right. No, that's fine. But now that he's seen certain coverages, now that he's seen how the NFL works as opposed to college, and just the comfortability with the Patriots system, I think that's where like I said, he'll feel more comfortable about going to, if it's Belichick or if it's Patricia or Judge, just being like, no, I don't want to run this, but in this, I feel more comfortable running play X, Y, or Z instead of play B. So I just think that's going to be part of it. And from all the reports, obviously Mac Jones slimmed down as far as drop some of maybe the cookie weight from his girlfriend making all those cookies. But seriously though, he dropped some of the fat and added some muscle. And of course, that's not going to hurt either. So just from the way Belichick of saying drastically improved, I'm excited to see what that means for this team moving forward. Maybe we'll see more trust from Belichick in going for it in situations, because there obviously were times last year where in some games where they were kind of getting close to the red zone, but they decided to kick it, or even they were kind of in that zone of, all right, it'd be like a 60-something yard field goal. We're over the 50-yard mark, but it's kind of in that no man's land zone as far as if you want to go for it or not. You don't want to give them that much room, even though it was like a 4th and 3, 4th and 2. Should we do it? No, I think this is where maybe we see Belichick, with the improvement that he made, just say, all right, damn the torpedoes. Here we go. We're going for it on 4th this time. And where last year I would have just said, no, we're either going to, if we don't run it in this situation, we're just going to punt it away, or just going to, or we'll go for the field goal. We'll go for the safe play. I think this is where Belichick may take a little more chances with Mac Jones. So that was the interesting thing. Of course, there were some other notes out there as well, as Devontae Parker, the new Patriots wide receiver after they traded for him from Miami. From all reports, he, quote unquote, dominated in the red zone area. He was a pretty dominant player during the practices, but albeit, remember, there's no pads, so it's not like they're hitting. But still, it is nice to hear that, because we know that they definitely need a playmate, like they need a playmaker, and I hate to say that like they didn't have one, but I mean, Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers are nice receivers. They're nice receivers. And I think I even like Kendrick Bourne more than I even did last year. So I would say he's better than nice. I think he's I think he's in probably he might take a step up in tiers this year where I thought going into last year he was like a fourth or third receiver. I think he's going to be a probably somewhere in the middle to getting close to the top tier, a second tier wide receiver. Your number two is because I saw a lot that I liked from him last year. And I know he got buried in the depth charts out there in San Francisco, but I think he and Mac Jones really get along really well. So I think this could be a thing where we see a late bloomer when it comes to Kendrick Bourne. So I really do like what he brings to the table. But if you can still get like B plus, I mean like a 1B type of thing going on here with Devontae Parker, if he kind of steps in and takes over, and between Kendrick Bourne and Devontae Parker, I think you're going to have a nice, maybe not what you obviously get down in Tampa Bay or what you're going to go get out in Vegas with Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow or out in LA with the Rams with Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson or out in Minnesota with Adam Thielen where Justin Jefferson's the number one and Adam Thielen's the number two. So I don't obviously it's not going to be to that level, but you're going to have a solid 1-2 punch. Is it going to be is it going to be electric? Is it going to be the 2007 Patriots? No, but I think this Patriots group of wide receivers gets a little bit underrated. And when we get into our breakdown of the position groups here, we'll definitely talk about that more. But from the reports today, with him out there playing well, that's obviously take it with a grain of salt because there's no pad, so I'm not going to get super jacked up about this. But I do like it a little bit because it just shows that maybe you might have something out there in Devontae Parker. You might have something that helps you kind of stretch things open even more. So I do like that was one of the things that you could take away. And of course, one of the things to kind of look forward to here in camp is going to be your camp battles for some of these big positions that are open, especially on the defensive side of the ball. That's really where a lot of these battles are going to be important because other than the defensive line and safety, there's really really no set position because let's look at the linebacker position here because obviously you traded away Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins left, Dante Hightower hasn't left, but he hasn't signed, so he's still a free agent. And you would imagine that if he comes back, if he goes anywhere, it's probably at this point, since nobody's signed him, that it'd be New England. But even if he does come back, he's a shell of himself. He's not the same Dante Hightower. He's not the Super Bowl wrecking linebacker that he was in the 2014 and 2016 Super Bowls against the Seahawks and the Falcons, making play after play on defense in key situations. He's not that same guy. So, and he's a bigger thumper. So it's not the same. And of course, so right now it's kind of Juwan Bentley is the one prototypical middle linebacker. But then that's where you have some other situations that the Patriots have at linebacker. And this is where you're going to have some of the incumbent ones that came out of some of the rookie classes, like Anthony Jennings from a couple of years ago. And then you also have Josh Uche, Roquan McMillan, and then you have some veterans in there like Roquan McMillan as well that are going to be vying for playing time as well. So, Cool. All right. I can't tell you what just happened in the Red Sox game because I'm not allowed to disseminate any of baseball's action, but I might want to go take a look. I'm just saying, might be good here for you. I'm trying to give you as much as I can without getting my podcast ripped off YouTube or ripped off anywhere else because I want to keep doing this, folks. But just take my word for it. You might want to take a look. But anyways, it's going to be one of the more interesting battles here, if you will, for at linebacker, because like I said, I mean, obviously the Patriots kind of have different qualifications as far as their linebackers, but because you'll have some of the outside backers come in and play inside, and some of the inside backers will play outside. But let's just look at it this way, because right now the Patriots have, obviously we said Jawan Bentley coming back. You have Cameron McGrone, and then you also have at some of the outside positions that some websites have it differently, like this one has it at strong side, but you have Roquan McMillan, Mac Wilson, and Harvey Lange. And then, well, here they have Matthew Judon, but I would put Matthew Judon more as like a defensive end almost. Kind of in the Willie McGinnis role, that elephant role, if you will. But they outside of there, they have Josh Uche and Ronnie Perkins, who again is kind of in that more of a defensive end than he is a linebacker, and then Anthony Jennings. So if out of this group, obviously, Jawan Bentley is the one kind of stand-up thumper linebacker, but then Roquan McMillan is somebody also that they signed. He was signed as a free agent who's kind of bounced around the NFL. Who has been with Miami, Las Vegas, but he's a guy that he's a solid linebacker. I'm not going to say out of Ohio State, but he's not anybody that I'm like, oh boy, you got to have him on your team. Of course, he's been around for 5 years and he's bounced around for a few reasons, but he's an okay linebacker. I don't think he's going to be a turnstile, but I don't think he's going to be anybody you're going to be out there buying a jersey for either. Then you have Mac Wilson, the Alabama product, who was drafted 4 years ago. So that in that 2019 draft. So it's he's a guy that, again, he's 240 pounds. He's 6'1", 240 pounds. So he's a guy that has a little bit of size, but never really kind of lived up to what the Cleveland Browns wanted him to be. So he's kind of the Browns version of Chase Winovich, who the Patriots traded away to Cleveland to get Mac Wilson. So maybe you might get another situation here where, like, remember a couple of years ago, well, more than a couple, but back in 2014, you had the Patriots bring in Akeem Ayers, some other linebackers that weren't great, weren't obviously these all pros or Pro Bowlers, but they played enough and made a few impact plays. So maybe if you can get something like that out of Mac Wilson. So right now, I think the sure locks to make it will probably be Roquan McMillan and Jawan Bentley, and then Josh Uche, who was the camp star from last year. Who's everybody's like, oh, he's going to pop, he's going to pop, he's going to pop. I heard that forever, and even halfway through the season, oh, you Uche. Listen, I hope Uche does well, and I watched him a lot playing at Michigan. And I like his game, but he just hasn't translated over to the pros. So hopefully that happens. And the one other guy here, I think the one other, so the last two spots, or the last two ones that I would really kind of focus on, because obviously I think McMillan, Jawan Bentley, Josh Uche, and Mac Wilson, I think are probably going to be pretty sure things to make the team. as far as probably in that middle linebacker and those other slots. So to me, the battle's going to come down here. You're going to have Cameron McGrone and Ronnie Perkins and Anthony Jennings. So I think maybe Ronnie Perkins you can put into one of those. He might kind of slide into a defensive end, possibly. So he might just take over from one of those positions. So he might get on the roster via that type of situation. But really, for me, so if you kind of want to put Ronnie Perkins off to the side, it's going to be with Cameron McGrone and Anthony Jennings for kind of one of those guys to kind of pop here. Now, I've heard a lot of good things here about McGrone, who the Patriots did draft. He's a Michigan product. He's 6'1", 236. So again, still kind of in that Mac Wilson type of mold as far as McGrone. And again, he's a little bit more of the modern day linebacker where it can go side to side, use a little bit of his speed because he's not this gigantic 250-pound linebacker. He's 233. So he's a little bit of a hybrid, if you will. And then you have Anthony Jennings, who this is going to be his third year. And he is an Alabama product as well on his end. He's 6'3", 259. So again, he's another one of these kind of hybrid defensive end linebacker positions. So again, that's going to be something where maybe between him and Jenkins and Jennings, this might be where they kind of battle that out for maybe that hybrid role, that maybe one of those other hybrid roles on the team. But it's going to be interesting to see how that all kind of comes out here, because you really don't have a classic middle linebacker outside, where I should say one that you like a 3-down classic linebacker on this team. Or even, you don't even have like a modern day classic linebacker, if you will, I guess. Or as I should say, you don't have like I meant to say you don't have an every down modern day linebacker like a well, obviously I know this is kind of a really really high comp to put out there, but like a Micah Parsons or any of the linebackers from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Davis down there, or Derek or White, like any of those type, or any one of those guys. Those are like your modern day superstar linebackers, but you don't even the closest thing you're going to have is probably like a Cameron McGrone, like maybe not an Anthony Jennings, but like I said, you have a McGrone. You also have Mac Wilson. So you have those type of guys that are bigger, but not the super size like Anthony Jennings is, 259, 6'3". So you have a couple guys that might be able to do that role, but you don't have anybody that's really just standing out. So you kind of have a mishmash of solid to maybe some questionable guys. So this is going to be interesting to see how they kind of all pan out, because you have some guys in Josh Uche who you expected a lot out of, hasn't lived up to the potential. You have a guy, Mac Wilson, who has some promise, but hasn't really lived up to it as well. And then you also, and again, that's where you have guys like Ronnie Perkins and Anthony Jennings, who were taken as kind of like project players that have size and ability, but there's still things to work on to see if it can translate to the NFL. So it's not perfect, and that's kind of why the Patriots brought in some of those other safeties, that, if you will, because you brought in Jabril Peppers, you still have Adrian Phillips, you brought in Cody Davis, you have Joshua Bledsoe. So again, you're kind of loading up with some of these safeties, because obviously Jabril Peppers is one of these guys that has been he's been a solid safety in the NFL. He's bigger because he's 213. Well, as far as weight wise, he's 213. He's 5'11, so he's not super tall. But again, he's kind of one of those guys that uses he's always been fast. So he's one of these guys that you could use in that safety slash smaller linebacker role. And again, you can do some of that as well with Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips as well. Bigger safeties that can kind of go up and play in the box. So it's going to be interesting to see how Belichick kind of mix and matches that. But again, the linebacker, the middle linebacker slash just linebacker, if you want to kind of just put it at linebacker as well, I'm fine with saying that as well. So that whole linebacker core is going to be one of my top units to kind of watch here as we go through camp to see how that all solidifies, because that's going to tell you a lot as far as that front seven, how it's going to be this year. Because as much as I love Christian Barmore, Matthew Judon, Lawrence Guy, and Devon Godchow up on that line, who've all played pretty well, actually. And Dietrich Wise, as well as the kind of like that front seven as far as the line and some of those defensive ends have played. It's just kind of been tough as far as you don't have that line, like that secondary help there with the linebackers. That's why I was so much wanted them to go out and draft Nakobe Dean, who fell to the third round and went to Philadelphia. I really wanted Nakobe Dean, modern type of linebacker, and I thought he'd be perfect in this system. But again, he's not there. So it's going to be interesting to see how they think they can do at linebacker. And of course, corner is going to be the other big one there as well, because again, we're talking about a situation where they had to bring back Malcolm Butler, who is long in the tooth here. I love Malcolm Butler to death, but man, he's 32 years old. He's a guy that he had a lot of great moments here in New England, but it's just hasn't. I don't think it's going to be. If you're thinking that you're going to get the 2014 through 2016 Malcolm Butler, you're going to be sorely mistaken. So don't get your hopes up for that. But he's a veteran that you can bring in, and hopefully he has something left in the tank. And then you have Terrence Mitchell, who, again, is a guy that's bounced around here, played with Dallas, Chicago, Houston, Kansas City, Cleveland, now with New England. So we're not talking about a stud here. And then that's where we kind of get into, we have some smaller guys here at corner, because along with Terrence Mitchell and Malcolm Butler, we're looking at Jalen Mills, who I don't want Jalen Mills to be your outside guy. I mean, I like him more as playing in the slot, or if he's an outside guy, I'd rather have him be your second guy where he gets help from the safety. But again, a solid corner, but nothing I'm going to write home about. So really not a hell of a lot at corner that I'm like banging down the door for. Then you have a special teamer in Justin Bethel. Obviously, you're going to bring back Jonathan Jones, who he's one of the better slot corners out there. But again, he's not somebody I want to be shoving out there on the outside. But Jonathan Jones is going to be solid as well. So you have a lot of kind of slot corners, smaller corners. So it's not, you don't have that shutdown Stephon Gilmore, Darrelle Revis that we've had in the past. Aqib Talib, guy that's on this roster right now. Now, obviously, some of the ones to kind of look at here are the two Jones brothers that they have. They drafted Marcus Jones, who's kind of a hybrid returner, slot corner type of guy, but again, the slot one. And then we have Jack Jones, who is kind of the talk of the camp here. He's one, quote unquote, one of their bigger corners. He's still only 5'11", but he's 5'11", 175. He's a guy that he runs a 4.48. So, and he went to Arizona State. So this is a guy to kind of look out here for Jack Jones to kind of be the one guy that kind of takes things and runs with it. At least that's what a lot of people have said that he might be the one guy that might come out of camp and be like, oh, this guy might actually be a legit NFL starter. But again, linebacker and corner are two positions where it just kind of feels like, all right, we're putting things all in a bag. We're going to shake it up and throw it on the table like a bunch of dice, and hopefully something turns out. And I mean, that's not the greatest way to go. I was hoping they would bring back J.C. Jackson, but they didn't. So now you're kind of left with a bunch of slot corners out there, and I'm not exactly going to be all that excited. So really to look into camp is going to see how the linebacking core altogether shakes out, what's going to happen at corner. Then wide receiver, not as much. It's just going to be more or less how the depth chart shakes out. And then obviously just see how Mac Jones continues to develop. And then, of course, with guys like Ramondre Stevens in their second year who played really well last year, Christian Barmore, keep an eye on those. And of course, the rookie class with Cole Strange, Tyquan Thornton. But the top two is going to be those positions to look at are going to be linebacker and the corner position as well. So that is pretty much all that there has been so far from Patriots campus. It's only been day one, so we will definitely get into more of it next week. And then we'll start to kind of we'll break down this Patriots team as far as what to look forward to for them. And of course, before you know it, we'll get to our NFL season preview show sometime in August. So NFL's getting here, and oh boy, I am so excited for it. I can't wait. And then, of course, anything else that happens in Boston sports, what happens with the Red Sox at the trade deadline, we'll keep you up to date. Any more rumors with the Celtics, we'll keep you up to date with that. Anything going on with the Bruins, we'll definitely talk about that as well. Of course, anything else that happens in the Boston sports landscape, we will keep you up to date on that as well. And remember, you can always follow the show here on YouTube every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, usually for about an hour and a half. We have a show, and you can always send your questions in during the live chat here. Remember that you can like and subscribe to the show here on YouTube. And then, of course, you have any other questions. If you can't make the live chat, you can always send into the show account on Twitter at NE Sports Weekly, or to my personal accounts at Sean_Met28. And that's both Twitter and Instagram. Send me a message there about the show, anything you like, dislike, or if you have a question that you want me to answer on the show about anything in the New England sports world or sports world in general, try to answer that here for you. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe for any notifications, and do the same on Spotify and on SoundCloud as well. Hit the like and subscribe there as well, so that you can get this podcast anywhere you go on any of your platforms, well, at least most of them, because we're still working on Apple, because that's always been something. So anyways, I hope you guys had a good time listening here tonight. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next week, folks.